Hey students, this is a video on justifying steps to solving equations. So you may already be familiar with solving and simplifying equations, but when we're justifying the steps to solving equations, we're basically explaining to someone what property we're using in each step. So for example, if we needed to combine like terms here using that property, we would combine 2x and 3x to get 5x and then include the plus 1 there. If we needed to use the distributive property to simplify, we'd multiply out this 3 and get 3x minus 12. And then these other properties of equality you might be familiar with, but you might not know what they're called. So in this first example, I have x minus 5 equals 9. I have subtraction going on, but why is this called the addition property of equality? Well, to solve this equation, I have to add 5 to both sides to cancel this subtracting of 5. And the of equality part means that you're going to do it to both sides of the equal sign. That's what makes this different than regular addition. And so we'll get x is equal to 14 here because of the addition property of equality. So subtraction property of equality is when you have to subtract something from both sides. And we'll get x equals 4 with that one. Multiplication property of equality, that's when you need to cancel out a division happening. So this is x divided by 5. To cancel out, we would do the opposite by multiplying by 5. Those cancel, and we'll get x equals 45. And then the division property of equality is when you have to divide something by both sides of the equal sign. I'll just call this 9/5 here. So let's put this to practice. So here's a pretty good example where it asks, justify the steps to solving the equation 5x minus 8 equals 22. Well, in the first step here, we want to answer why did we get this step, or how did we get to this step? How did I get 5x minus 8 equals 22? Well, that was the problem that they gave us. And so most oftentimes, your first justification is always going to be given, except for in some examples where they might start solving in the first step. And then the next step, we want to answer the question, how did we get from step 1 to step 2? Basically, what I'm noticing is the minus 8 is gone and the 22 also changed to a 30. So what we had to do was add 8 to both sides to cancel out that minus 8, and they aren't going to show you that step of adding 8 to both sides, but you still have to identify that this is going to be the addition property of equality by adding 8 to both sides. Okay, and then the next one, how did we get from step 2 to step 3? Well, basically the 5 is missing, and how do we get rid of it? We have to divide both sides by 5, and so that's going to be the division property of equality. And these are the steps to justifying the solving of this equation. Let's do another example. So we want to justify the steps to solving this equation here, 7x plus 9 minus 2x equals negative 16. So I can see in the first step, remember we want to answer how did they get to this step? Well, this was given to us again. It's always our first step. Second one, how did we get from step 2 to step 3? So what do we notice is different? Well, in this case, I'm actually noticing the negative 16 is still there. So it really looks like they may have combined like terms, 7x minus 2x. And so that's our justification for the second step. They combined like terms. To get from step 2 to step 3, it looks like they got rid of this plus 9 by subtracting 9 from both sides. It's going to be the subtraction property of equality. And then in the last step, they had to get rid of that 5 again. And so they had to divide both sides by 5 to get there. We'll do one last example just for some extra practice. Justify the steps to solving this equation, 8x equals 6x minus 2. So how did we get this first step? It was given to us in the problem. And then in step 2, how did we get from step 1 to this one? Well, it looks like they distributed that 6, multiplied it out to get to the next one, so they used the distributive property. Then next, what did they do to get from step 2 to step 3? Well, I'm noticing this 8x changed to a 2x, and this 6x is gone. So they had to subtract 6x from both sides, which is a trick if you ever have x on both sides. Ooh, sorry for my pen there. On both sides. And so that means they had to subtract from both sides of the equal sign, subtraction property of equality. And then the last step, dividing both sides by 2, means we're going to use the division property of equality. And that's how you can justify steps to solving equations.